Hello, British English with Maria here. Today we're talking about the difficult or unusual questions that some employers might use in the interview process. So before we go into the details of different questions and how perhaps to best answer them, let's think about why the interviewers might want to ask the unusual questions that are not generally on the list of questions they ask. And thinking about that is really important because it will help you to determine the reason behind the question, will help you to understand how to answer it in the best way in order to maximize, maybe not get the job necessarily, but to maximize your chances of getting that job. So we have to think from an employer's perspective, right? And it's always good to look at things from the other person's perspective to understand things more deeply, better. So the reason why they go for the unusual questions is because they have such a vast number of candidates and applications made. And if you think about it, I mean, if you've ever prepared for a job interview, if you've had a number of job interviews in your life, you will probably realize that the questions they ask are very similar, and if you do the proper preparation in advance of research and thinking, putting the answers together, you can really be job ready, interview ready, and dazzle and impress the employer with your answers. However, if you ask questions that are unexpected, that are not in the book or on the website with the typical general questions, it will make the candidate think on his feet or her feet, right? They have to react in that moment. They wouldn't have had the chance to prepare for it in advance, to do the research. So that really can allow the employees to separate, the good from the best or the best from the good, to really see who can think on their feet, to react in the moment. And more importantly, the answer will not be rehearsed or pre-prepared. And thinking in that moment, you can only give your honest answer, 100% honest answer. You should be honest in an interview to begin with, but you will not be able to filter it or hide behind some veil of some political way of phrasing, etc. So it gets an employer a chance to really get to know the candidate well, as well as to see how they react to a stressful situation. Because in the world of work, in many positions, we are faced with the unknown. We are faced with difficult situations that we are not prepared for. And you've seen how the candidate reacts to something can be very telling about their personality, about their attitude to difficult or unexpected situations. Because if you get flustered or angry or embarrassed, that shows that you are unable to be flexible and adapt to this situation. You have to also understand it's not about giving the perfect answer. You might not give the perfect answer, but act very confidently, have a very clear thought process, maybe add a sprinkle of humor to your answer. But you might, on the other hand, give a perfect answer, but sound very stressed and nervous and uncomfortable suddenly. And if that's different to the rest of the interview, of how you've been behaving for the rest of the interview, that can leave a negative impression. So it's all about how you react as much as, if not more so, what you say content-wise. And I think a lot of people get annoyed by such questions. They feel that the employer is testing them or wasting their time or just putting them in an uncomfortable situation unnecessarily. However, if you see it as an opportunity to really engage with the employer or whoever is interviewing you, to showcase your personality, it's a chance to show who you are as a person deeply, right? And to connect on a different level, on a more maybe human level. If you see it as a positive, then the energy will shift and you will just answer that question in a more positive manner, and it will show and it will help you to create a more positive, favorable impression with the interviewer. So now let's look at different questions that could be asked and how perhaps, or what is the best way, or different good ways to answer it, and perhaps not very good ways. So one question I came across and I really liked is, are you a nice person? And that's an interesting one because we all want to be nice. Our inherent human need is to be accepted, to be loved, to be liked. So imagine someone asking you, are you a nice person? First response, first emotional response, of course I am a nice person. But then you might start thinking and going, well, maybe not everyone thinks I'm nice, right? You can't be liked by everyone all the time. It's impossible. But I think you can take it a step further and think about what are they asking. So is being nice at work or in any sort of profession always a possible thing? I mean, of course you want to be polite, pleasant, kind, approachable, etc. Again, depending on the position you're applying for. However, you cannot be nice 100% of the time. And what does it mean to be nice? So there are situations at work when you have to disagree with the boss, with your colleague, you have to question, challenge things, and that might be seen as not being nice, as being difficult, or as being maybe conflictive, but that's the nature of the job. So I think if you show that you're willing to put the task at hand, the business objectives above someone liking you, so you're not going to stay quiet, not raise an issue for the fear of being rejected or disliked, that I think shows true professionalism. Of course, you want to do it in a polite manner, in a respectful manner, but if you avoid doing things, questioning, raising issues for the fear of being disliked, then that's actually unprofessional. So I think that's just my interpretation, and I hope it helps you to think about that question in a different way. Another question that I've seen a lot, and I think my students have seen a lot, is if you could have dinner with anyone from history, who would it be and what would you talk about? And again, there isn't really a right or wrong answer here. It's just showing what your interests are, why you would choose a certain person over someone else, and what you would talk about shows your interests, your logical skills, as well as your imagination. So it's just something personal, I guess, and a way to engage on a different level. Again, there is no wrong or right answer here. Personally, I would talk about meeting my ancestors because I'm very interested in my family tree. I don't have much information about them. Unfortunately, there aren't many records. I cannot talk to them or someone to find out what happened in their lives. There was a lot of moving around, the world in my ancestry, and it would be really fascinating to learn more about that. So I definitely would love to engage and talk more to my predecessors more than anyone else from history, because I think it could be an amazing painter or artist or writer. That they could be, they're fantastic, they're well known, but maybe talking to them might not be so interesting for me. I might not have much to say to them or ask them, or they might not want to talk to me in the first place. So what would be the point? So I will just explain it like that. That's my personal answer. You might like it, you might not. You might actually want to meet someone from history and engage with, and that's fine. That is your personal answer. Just make sure you explain the reasoning, the logic, the sort of ideas behind your answer. Don't just give an answer and leave it there. Give a bit more of an explanation. Another question, and maybe two types of question, is if you could be an animal or any animal, or if you could be a fruit, or if you could be, I don't know, a plant, or if you could be a country. Basically, this question is just imagining being someone that you couldn't actually be, right? So here, again, it's not about the perfect answer or the right or wrong answer. It's about your reasoning skills. It's your ability to think metaphorically even, right? To compare, say, an island or a plant to a person. Think about the characteristics, the qualities it possesses, and why you would want to be that certain something, whether an animal or a fruit. And that can showcase demonstrate the sort of qualities that you aspire to have, or perhaps you already have. And that could be really interesting, of course. For example, I don't know, an animal, I would probably choose a bird, because I think it would give me an amazing view point from above of different angles that you do not see when you're on the ground, right? So you get a really bird's eye view of the situation, of the world. And perhaps that might be really suitable for certain position where you don't need to be to know things in too much detail, but you need to have an overview of many different tasks and many different I don't know, part of a project or something like that, like a project manager, for example. So you have to kind of think a little bit about how the qualities that, these certain things or animals would possess and how they could be useful in your potential job. So don't think too hard, of course, especially if you haven't prepared for this question. But now that you know that it can be an unusual question, perhaps you could have a think about it in advance. But again, very important thing, don't just say, I want to be a lion and leave it at that. Explain the reason why you chose a lion, what is the logic behind, what are the qualities that you associate perhaps with a lion, and why you aspire to be a lion, or why you think you're already like a lion, etc. Another very interesting question is explaining something very complex, difficult, technical to someone who doesn't have that technical background or doesn't have that knowledge of this level of complexity. So it's just your ability to break down something complex into something maybe more basic, more relatable. And this is really, really important for anyone going into technical background that might have to communicate with someone who's not technical or from a different background. For example, data analysts would have to explain things, to investors, for example. They cannot use the technical jargon that they are familiar with. They have to kind of translate it into English, into everyday English, or English that, say, investors understand, financial terms, etc. So you have to make it accessible, easy to understand, and that approach is so important in so many professions and positions. So you might be asked that question in an abstract way, or perhaps they might say, okay, you have this knowledge of, say, this skill or this software or this process. How would you explain it to someone who has absolutely no knowledge whatsoever about this? So it might be more practical, where you have to actually explain it and break it down, or it might be more abstract, which makes it a bit easier, I suppose. But then again, there are some of you who prefer doing the more practical rather than the theoretical stuff for explanation. Another typical question, not typical, but it could be a typical one if you ask a sort of unusual question, is what sort of things are you most proud of, or what is the biggest achievement of your life? That could be non-professional, or just what is your biggest mistake in life that you've made, or the best decision, right? So just reflecting on your past experiences live, I think that could be really useful to do beforehand. I think it's an interesting aspect or topic to think about in general, because it makes you reflect on your life, see how far you've come, see what maybe mistakes you've made. Would you do things differently, or perhaps that mistake led you to the right decision eventually. So I think that could be a great thing to think about, as I mentioned, without whether or not it comes up in the interview. And other questions include, favorite TV character, who would play you in a film, or perhaps who do you admire, as well as, for example, if you could live on an island with unlimited supply of food and water, what else would you take with you? What would you do if you had no financial obligations? So there's different kinds of type of questions that could actually be really fun to think about, but can also really showcase your personality, your interests, and just the way that you think. And again, it's unprepared. You can now hopefully prepare for some of these types of questions in advance. Think about them. Perhaps it could be fun for you to do, whether or not you are preparing for an interview, or you could, just role play it, or just have a fun conversation with a friend or a partner. It's a great conversation starter as well with some people. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's session. I think it's certainly a fun one for me. I do like those kinds of questions, but I think they can be really tricky if you've never thought about them beforehand and you just get asked on the spot. But do not fear. I think if you work through at least some of these types of questions, if you get asked something a little bit different or in a different way, you can already start thinking about what is behind that question. How can I answer it in the best way to demonstrate my sort of way of thinking or my personality that could be suitable for this job? All right, so hope you have fun thinking about the questions and the answers, and hopefully it will help you prepare for maybe some interviews where you might get asked such questions. Have a fantastic day. This was British English with Maria.